Somewhere beneath the sands of distant deserts, beneath the roots of forests that have grown and fallen 1,000 times, there are empires you have never heard of. Kingdoms that once stretched across continents, ruled millions, built monuments that touched the clouds, and then quietly disappeared from memory. Tonight, as the world outside grows still, we will walk through the ruins of civilizations that time forgot and listen to the whispers they left behind. Tonight, we explore the forgotten empires of history, the realms that shaped the ancient world yet vanished from our collective memory. These are the stories written in crumbling stone and buried gold, waiting to be remembered once more. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. Over the next 2 hours, over 100 gentle facts will carry you through the shadows of lost kingdoms and silent capitals. There is nothing to memorize, nothing to remember. Just listen and let your mind drift. Have you ever wondered what great civilizations rose and fell without leaving a trace in the history books you read as a child? You are not alone. If these quiet journeys through forgotten history help you rest, consider joining us by subscribing. Each new listener helps this channel grow, one sleepy soul at a time. Take a slow breath now and let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting. The day is behind you and the night is gentle. There is no hurry, no agenda, only the soft unfolding of stories from long ago. Let us begin. The Hittites ruled an empire that rivaled ancient Egypt, yet most people today have never heard their name. In the second millennium before the Common Era, while the pyramids stood watch over the Nile, another great power flourished in the mountains of Anatolia. The Hittites built an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to Mesopotamia, commanding armies, forging alliances, and challenging the might of Egypt itself. Their kings exchanged letters with the most powerful rulers of the ancient world. Their diplomats negotiated treaties that shaped the fate of nations. Yet when their civilization collapsed around 1,200 years before the Common Era, the memory of their greatness slowly faded. For nearly 3,000 years, the Hittites existed only as brief mentions in ancient texts. It was only in the 19th century that archaeologists began to unearth their cities. An empire that once shook the foundations of the ancient world had become a whisper in the sand. The Hittite capital of Hadusa was home to over 50,000 people when London was just a marshland. High in the rugged landscape of central Anatolia, the city of Hadusa sprawled across rocky hillsides and fertile valleys, its massive walls encircling temples, palaces, and homes. At its height, more than 50,000 souls lived within these walls, making it one of the largest cities in the ancient world. The streets were organized and purposeful, the buildings constructed with attention to both beauty and strength. Great libraries housed thousands of clay tablets inscribed with laws, treaties, and religious texts. Stone lions guarded the city gates, their carved faces weathered but still watchful. Meanwhile, the place that would become London was nothing more than marshland along a slow river. The contrast reminds us how different the map of civilization once looked, how the centers of power shift across the earth. The Hittites signed the world's first known peace treaty with Rameses II. In the year 1279, before the Common Era, after decades of warfare and thousands of lives lost, the Hittite king Hattusili III and the Egyptian pharaoh Rameses II did something unprecedented. They negotiated a formal peace treaty, complete with provisions for mutual defense and the return of refugees. The treaty was so important that copies were made in both languages, inscribed on silver tablets and clay. Remarkably, versions have survived to our time, one in the ruins of Hattusa and another carved on the walls of the temple at Karnak. The language speaks of brotherhood, of shared enemies, of a desire to end the suffering of war. It is a document that feels surprisingly modern, a reminder that the longing for peace is as old as civilization itself. A replica now hangs in the United Nations headquarters, connecting the ancient world to our own. Hittite ironworking technology was so advanced that it was considered a state secret. While bronze was the metal of choice for most civilizations of the ancient Near East, the Hittites discovered something that would eventually change the world. They learned to smelt iron. This knowledge gave them access to weapons and tools that were harder and more durable than anything their neighbors possessed. The Hittite kings understood the strategic value of this knowledge and guarded it jealously, restricting the export of iron and keeping the methods of production secret. Letters have survived in which foreign kings begged the Hittite ruler for iron, promising gold in exchange. The Hittites usually refused or sent only small ceremonial pieces. When the empire finally collapsed, this knowledge slowly spread across the ancient world, ushering in the Iron Age and transforming everything from agriculture to warfare. The secret they kept for centuries became the foundation of a new era. The Mitanni kingdom was so powerful that Egyptian pharaohs married their princesses to secure peace. Between the great empires of the Hittites and Assyrians, in lands along the upper Tigris and Euphrates, the kingdom of Mitanni flourished as one of the dominant powers of the ancient Near East. Their rulers were so respected that Egyptian pharaohs sought alliances through marriage rather than risk confrontation. Egyptian kings, including Thutmose IV and Amenhotep III, welcomed Mitanni princesses into their households. Diplomatic correspondence discovered at Amarna paints a vivid picture of ancient diplomacy. Gifts exchanged, grievances aired, marriages negotiated across hundreds of miles. The Mitanni ruling class appears to have spoken an Indo-Aryan language, worshipped gods whose names echo those of India, and brought knowledge of chariots that transformed warfare. Yet despite their power, the kingdom was eventually swallowed by its neighbors, leaving behind only fragments. Mitanni horse trainers wrote the world's oldest surviving manual on raising and training horses. Among the treasures from the ruins of the Hittite capital is a remarkable document, a detailed manual on the care, feeding, and training of horses, written by a man named Kikuli who identified himself as a trainer from Mitanni. Dating back roughly 3,400 years, this text represents the oldest known work on horsemanship. The manual covers everything from the daily routine of exercise to the proper diet for horses at different stages of training. The precision suggests deep understanding of equine physiology developed over generations. Horses and chariots were the advanced military technology of that era, and the Mitanni were renowned for the quality of their horses. This knowledge was so valuable that it was preserved even after the kingdom fell. The voice of Kikuli, speaking across millennia, connects us to a world where the bond between human and horse was survival. And from the chariot kingdoms of the Bronze Age, we turn now to the mountains of eastern Anatolia, where another forgotten power once held sway. The kingdom of Urartu built fortresses so strong that some still stand 3,000 years later. In the mountainous highlands around Lake Van, in what is now eastern Turkey and Armenia, the kingdom of Urartu rose to challenge the might of the Assyrian Empire during the first millennium before the Common Era. The Urartians were master builders who understood that control of high ground meant control of trade routes and the ability to resist invasion. They constructed fortresses of massive stone blocks, fitted together with such precision that many walls remain standing today. These citadels perched on rocky outcrops and mountain ridges, their storage rooms carved deep into bedrock to hold grain against years of siege. The engineering required to position these enormous stones speaks to sophisticated understanding of construction. Visitors who climb to these ancient sites find themselves standing where Urartian soldiers once kept watch. The stones remember what the world has forgotten. Urartian engineers created irrigation canals so well designed that local farmers still use them today. The mountains of the Urartian homeland received plentiful rainfall and snowmelt, but the timing did not always match agricultural needs. Urartian engineers designed an elaborate system of canals, channels, and reservoirs that captured water from mountain streams and distributed it across fertile valleys. Some channels stretched for tens of kilometers, following the landscape with precision that required careful surveying. The gradients were calculated so water would flow steadily without eroding the walls. What makes these achievements remarkable is that some waterways remain functional nearly 3,000 years after they were carved. Farmers continue to irrigate their fields using channels that Urartian workers dug with bronze tools when the Assyrian Empire was still expanding and Greece and Rome had not yet flourished. It is engineering designed not for glory, but for life. Urartu's metalworkers produced bronze cauldrons that were traded as far as Greece and Etruria. The craftsmen of Urartu were renowned throughout the ancient world for their skill in working bronze, producing objects of such beauty that they were prized far beyond their kingdom. Their most famous creations were large cauldrons mounted on tripod stands, decorated with figures of bulls, lions, and mythical creatures. These vessels have been discovered not only in the Urartian homeland, but in tombs across the Mediterranean, from Greek islands to Etruscan cities. The presence of these objects so far from their origin tells a story of trade networks connecting civilizations across thousands of kilometers. For those who acquired these cauldrons, they were exotic treasures and symbols of wealth. For the metalworkers who created them, they represented generations of skill passed from master to apprentice. The cauldrons remain scattered across museums, silent witnesses to a forgotten mastery. The Lydians are credited with inventing coinage, changing the nature of commerce forever. In the river valleys of western Anatolia, where streams carried flecks of gold and silver from the mountains, the Kingdom of Lydia made an innovation that transformed civilization. Around the 7th century before the Common Era, the Lydians began producing small pieces of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, stamped with symbols guaranteeing their weight and purity. These were the world's first true coins, standardized units of value exchanged without weighing the metal each time. Before coinage, trade depended on barter or weighed quantities of precious metal. The Lydian coins changed everything. A merchant could carry wealth in a small pouch and conduct transactions quickly. The idea spread rapidly, adopted by Greeks, Persians, and every major civilization. Today, though we pay with digital signals, the basic concept remains. Every coin traces its ancestry to a small kingdom. King Croesus of Lydia was so wealthy that his name became a proverb for wretches. The last king of Lydia ruled over a land where rivers ran with gold. Croesus accumulated treasures beyond imagination, filling his palace with precious metals and gemstones from across the known world. His wealth was so vast that visitors from distant lands came simply to witness it, and his generosity to the Greek temples at Delphi and elsewhere was legendary. The phrase "rich as Croesus" passed into common speech, a measure of unimaginable wealth that persists to this day. Yet Croesus met a tragic end. When he asked the oracle at Delphi whether he should attack the Persian Empire, he was told that if he crossed the river Halys, a great empire would fall. He crossed, and an empire did fall, his own. The Persians under Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia, and Croesus vanished from history, some say executed, others say spared. His story became a parable about the fragility of fortune. The Phrygians built their capital Gordium at the crossroads of continents, controlling trade for centuries. In the heart of Anatolia, where the road from the Aegean coast met routes leading eastward into Asia, the Phrygians established their capital at Gordium. This strategic position made them gatekeepers of commerce between East and West, and their city grew wealthy from tolls on goods passing through. The Phrygians are remembered today for King Midas, whose legendary touch turned everything to gold, a myth reflecting the kingdom's reputation for wealth. Archaeologists excavating Gordion have discovered elaborate tombs filled with treasures and furniture of craftsmanship. The famous Gordian knot, which Alexander the Great supposedly cut with his sword, was kept in the city's temple. The Phrygians left their mark on music too, credited with inventing several instruments. When their kingdom fell, their influence lived on in the cultures that followed. And deeper into the mists of the ancient world, we find the Elamites, whose civilization flourished before Babylon rose to power. The Elamite civilization is older than both Babylon and Assyria, yet few remember their name. In the mountains and plains of southwestern Iran, a civilization flourished that predates most of the famous empires of Mesopotamia. The Elamites built cities, developed their own script, and created art of striking beauty, while the lands that would become Babylon and Assyria were still scattered settlements. For nearly 3,000 years, Elam remained a major power, sometimes conquering its neighbors, sometimes being conquered, but always maintaining its distinct identity. Elamite armies sacked Babylon more than once, carrying away treasures that archaeologists have recovered in their own cities. Their capital, Susa, became one of the great cities of the ancient world, later serving as a residence for Persian kings. Yet the Elamites have been nearly forgotten, overshadowed by better documented civilizations. Their story reminds us how much of history remains in shadow. Elamite scribes developed their own writing system, independent of Mesopotamia. While the civilizations of Sumer and Akkad developed cuneiform writing, the Elamites created their own script known as Proto-Elamite. This system of signs and symbols remains only partially deciphered, holding secrets that scholars have struggled to unlock for a century. Later, the Elamites adopted cuneiform, but adapted it to write their own language, which bore no relation to the tongues of their neighbors. The existence of an independent writing system suggests that Elamite civilization developed along its own path, parallel to but separate from Mesopotamia. Thousands of clay tablets covered in Elamite script have been recovered, recording economic transactions, religious rituals, and royal proclamations. Each tablet is a message from millennia past, waiting for the day when we might understand what the Elamites wish to tell us. Their written legacy endures, even if their voices remain muffled. The ziggurats of Elam were among the tallest structures in the ancient Near East. Rising from the flat plains of southwestern Iran, the ziggurats of Elam reached toward the heavens like artificial mountains. The most famous, Chagha Zanbil, was built around 1,300 years before the Common Era and originally stood over 50 meters tall. Even in its ruined state, it remains one of the best preserved ziggurats in the world, its massive tiers of mud brick still visible across the landscape. These step towers served as temples, their heights bringing worshippers closer to the gods. The construction of such enormous structures required sophisticated planning, vast quantities of materials, and the labor of thousands. The Elamites decorated their ziggurats with glazed bricks, creating patterns visible from miles away. Today, visitors standing at the base of Chagha Zanbil feel the same awe that travelers must have felt 3,000 years ago. And as you rest with these ancient stories, there is no need to hold onto every name or date. Let them pass through you like clouds drifting across a night sky. Take a slow breath if you wish, and let your shoulders soften just a little more. The Medes united the Iranian plateau and helped bring down the mighty Assyrian Empire. For centuries, the peoples of the Iranian plateau lived in scattered tribes and small kingdoms, unable to challenge the great empires to their west. Then the Medes rose to unite them, forging a confederation powerful enough to threaten Assyria itself. In 612 before the Common Era, the Medes joined forces with the Babylonians and descended upon Nineveh, the magnificent Assyrian capital. The city fell, and with it the empire that had terrorized the ancient world for centuries. The Medes established their own kingdom stretching from Anatolia to the borders of India, creating an empire that would last until the Persians, originally their vassals, rose to overthrow them. Though the Median Empire was short-lived, it represented a turning point, the moment when power shifted from Mesopotamia to the Iranian highlands. The Medes paved the way for the Persian Empire that would follow. Median architecture influenced Persian palace design for centuries to come. Though few Median buildings have survived intact, their architectural innovations lived on in the palaces of their Persian successors. The grand columned halls of Persepolis, with tall pillars supporting magnificent ceilings, appear to have originated in Median royal architecture. The Medes developed a distinctive style blending influences from Mesopotamia, the steppe peoples to the north, and their own traditions. Their capital, Ecbatana, was said to have walls painted in 7 different colors, each ring representing a different level. Greek writers described Median palaces as places of wonder, filled with treasures and precious metals. When the Persians conquered the Medes, they absorbed these traditions and spread them across their empire. The influence of Median builders can still be traced in Persian sites from Egypt to Central Asia. The forgotten Medes shaped the look of the ancient world. And now we travel southward, across deserts and seas, to the highlands of East Africa, where an empire once traded with Rome. The kingdom of Aksum was one of the 4 great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. In the highlands of what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea, a kingdom rose that would be counted among the mightiest of its age. The Persian prophet Mani, writing in the 3rd century, named Aksum as one of the 4 great empires of the world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. Aksum controlled the trade routes connecting the Mediterranean with the riches of Africa and the Indian Ocean. Its merchants dealt in ivory, gold, incense, and exotic animals, growing wealthy from commerce spanning 3 continents. The Aksumite kings built towering obelisks, minted their own currency, and corresponded with Roman emperors as equals. At its height, Aksum conquered territories across the Red Sea in Arabia and dominated the Horn of Africa. Yet today, this once great power is largely forgotten outside scholarly circles. The kingdom that rivaled Rome sleeps beneath Ethiopian soil. Aksum minted its own gold coins, the only African kingdom to do so in the ancient world. While other African kingdoms traded in gold, Aksum transformed it into currency. Aksumite gold coins circulated throughout the ancient trading world, from India to the Mediterranean, bearing images of Aksumite kings and inscriptions in Greek and Ge'ez. The quality of these coins rivaled those of Rome and Persia, demonstrating sophisticated metalworking. Silver and bronze coins followed, creating a complete currency system that facilitated trade across vast distances. The coins also serve as historical records, showing the succession of kings and the evolution of Aksumite culture over centuries. When Christianity became the state religion, crosses appeared on the coins, making them some of the earliest Christian currency in the world. These small metal discs, scattered across archaeological sites from Egypt to India, tell the story of a kingdom that once stood at the center of commerce. The obelisks of Aksum are among the largest monolithic structures ever carved by human hands. In the ancient city of Aksum, stone pillars rose toward the sky, carved from single pieces of granite and erected to honor the kingdom's rulers. The largest of these, now fallen, would have stood over 30 meters tall and weighed around 500 tons, making it one of the largest monoliths ever raised. Even the standing obelisks reach heights of over 20 meters, their surfaces decorated with carvings imitating the wooden architecture of Aksumite buildings. How the ancient Aksumites quarried, transported, and erected these enormous stones remains a subject of wonder. The obelisks marked royal tombs and served as expressions of Aksumite power, visible for miles across the highlands. Many still stand in their original positions, silent sentinels watching over the ruins of a civilization that once challenged Rome. They remain among the most impressive monuments of the ancient world. Aksum was one of the first kingdoms in the world to officially adopt Christianity as its state religion. In the 4th century of the Common Era, King Ezana of Aksum made a decision that would shape the religious landscape of East Africa for nearly 2,000 years. He converted to Christianity and declared it the official religion of his kingdom, making Aksum one of the earliest Christian states. The conversion appears genuine, influenced by a Syrian Christian named Frumentius, who had been shipwrecked on the Aksumite coast as a child and later became bishop. Churches were built, monasteries founded, and the Christian faith took deep root in the highlands. The Aksumite Church developed its own traditions, maintaining connections with the wider Christian world while creating unique practices. Even today, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church traces its origins directly to Ezana's conversion. In a land where ancient beliefs held sway, the cross found a home that endures to this day. Aksumite merchants controlled the trade routes between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. The Red Sea was the ancient world's highway connecting east and west, and the Aksumites positioned themselves at its heart. From their port city of Adulis, Aksumite merchants sent ships to Arabia, India, and distant shores, returning with silks, spices, and precious goods. They connected the Roman world with the riches of the Orient, profiting handsomely as middlemen in this global commerce. Roman and Greek traders visited Aksumite ports, leaving accounts of a prosperous kingdom with well-organized markets. Ivory from the African interior flowed through Aksumite hands to workshops in Rome. Frankincense and myrrh from Arabian coasts passed through their warehouses. This control of trade made Aksum wealthy and powerful. When the trade routes shifted, so too did Aksumite fortunes, but for centuries they stood at the crossroads of the world. The Nubian kingdom of Kush conquered Egypt and ruled as pharaohs for nearly a century. South of Egypt, along the upper reaches of the Nile, the kingdom of Kush grew powerful while its northern neighbor weakened. In the 8th century before the Common Era, the Kushite king Pe led his armies northward and conquered all of Egypt, establishing the 25th dynasty. For nearly a century, Kushite pharaohs sat on the throne of the two lands, wearing the double crown and building pyramids in both Egypt and their homeland. They were devout worshippers of the Egyptian god Amun and saw themselves as restorers of traditional Egyptian values. Eventually, Assyrian invasions pushed the Kushites back to their homeland, but they continued to rule in Nubia for centuries more. The Kushites built more pyramids than the Egyptians ever did, smaller and steeper, still standing in the Sudanese desert. Their story reminds us that power in ancient Africa flowed in many directions. And further west, along the bend of the Great Niger River, empires of gold rose and fell in the African savanna. The Ghana Empire controlled so much gold that Arab traders called it the land of gold. In the savannas south of the Sahara, where the land grows green after the rains, an empire rose on the wealth of gold. Arab merchants who crossed the desert to trade brought back tales of a kingdom so rich that gold was more common than iron. They called it the land of gold, and its rulers the kings of gold. The Ghana Empire controlled the trade routes where gold from the southern forests met salt from the northern desert, and they grew wealthy taxing every transaction. The king maintained a monopoly on gold nuggets, allowing only gold dust to circulate freely, keeping the supply controlled and prices high. His court was legendary for its splendor, with servants carrying golden shields and swords, courtiers dressed in fine cloth and jewels. Though the empire eventually declined, its reputation for wealth lived on in stories told across the medieval world. Ghana's kings were said to own gold nuggets so large that they were used to tether royal horses. The wealth of Ghana's rulers was the stuff of legend. Arab travelers who visited the empire recorded that the king owned gold nuggets so massive they were used as hitching posts for the royal horses. Whether literally true or poetic exaggeration, such stories reflected a genuine abundance that astonished visitors from lands where gold was precious and rare. The king sat in audience surrounded by gold, his throne adorned with it, his courtiers carrying golden objects that sparkled in the African sun. This display of wealth was not merely vanity but political strategy, demonstrating power to vassals and visitors alike. The gold came from mines in the forests to the south, territories the king controlled through a network of loyal governors. By monopolizing the largest nuggets, the king kept the true source of the gold secret, using mystery to maintain his advantage over foreign traders. The silent trade of Ghana allowed merchants to exchange goods without ever meeting face to face. In the markets of Ghana, a remarkable system developed that allowed trade to flourish between peoples who did not speak the same language or perhaps did not trust each other. Merchants would lay out their salt or other goods in a designated place and then withdraw. Gold traders would come, examine the goods, leave what they considered a fair amount of gold, and depart. The first merchants would return, take the gold if satisfied or leave it if they wanted more, and this silent negotiation would continue until both sides agreed. This system, sometimes called silent trade, protected the secrecy of gold sources while enabling commerce across vast cultural divides. It speaks to human ingenuity in overcoming barriers, finding ways to cooperate even without words. The echoes of this practice can still be found in the markets of West Africa today. The Mali Empire succeeded Ghana and became one of the wealthiest states the world has ever known. When the Ghana Empire declined, a new power rose in the savanna lands of West Africa. The Mali Empire, founded by the legendary Sundiata Keita, would grow to become one of the largest and richest empires in African history. At its height, Mali stretched from the Atlantic coast to the edges of the Sahara, encompassing the gold fields that had made Ghana wealthy and adding new sources of wealth besides. The Emperor of Mali controlled not only gold, but also the trade in salt, copper, and slaves that crossed the desert. Cities flourished under Mali's protection, becoming centers of learning and commerce. The empire maintained diplomatic relations with kingdoms across Africa and the Mediterranean, its ambassadors welcomed in distant courts. Mali's golden age lasted for centuries, a testament to the vision of its founders and the wealth of its land. Mansa Musa of Mali gave away so much gold in Cairo that he crashed the local economy for a decade. In 1324, Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali, set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca with an entourage of 60,000 people and hundreds of camels laden with gold. When he passed through Cairo, he distributed gold so generously that he flooded the local markets, causing the value of the precious metal to plummet. The Egyptian economy took nearly a decade to recover from this sudden inflation. Musa's pilgrimage put Mali on the map of the medieval world, and European mapmakers began drawing his kingdom prominently on their charts. He returned home with scholars, architects, and artisans who would transform the cities of Mali. The story of his journey spread across 3 continents, making him perhaps the most famous African ruler of the medieval world. His wealth seemed mythical to outsiders, yet it was entirely real. Timbuktu, under Mali rule, housed one of the greatest libraries of the medieval world. In the city of Timbuktu, where the Niger River bends toward the desert, scholars gathered from across the Islamic world. Under the patronage of Mali's rulers, the city became a center of learning that rivaled the great universities of Europe. Manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law filled the libraries and private collections of Timbuktu's scholars. Students came from distant lands to study under its teachers, and graduates carried its learning across Africa. The famous Sankore Mosque housed a university that taught theology, law, and the sciences. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts were produced and collected, many of which survive today in family collections and libraries. When European explorers finally reached Timbuktu in the 19th century, they found a city diminished but still remembered as a place of learning, a beacon of knowledge in the heart of Africa. The Songhai Empire was larger than Western Europe at its height in the 15th century. When the Mali Empire weakened, the Songhai rose to take its place, eventually building an empire that dwarfed its predecessor. At its height in the late 15th century, the Songhai Empire stretched across nearly 1,400 kilometers, encompassing modern-day Mali, Niger, and portions of surrounding countries. This made it larger than all of Western Europe combined. The empire was organized with remarkable efficiency, divided into provinces with appointed governors and a professional army to maintain order. The city of Gao served as capital, while Timbuktu continued to flourish as a center of trade and learning. Songhai's rulers maintained the trans-Saharan trade routes that brought wealth to West Africa. The empire fell suddenly in 1591 when Moroccan invaders armed with gunpowder defeated its armies, but for a century, it had been one of the largest states on earth. And along the Guinea coast, another kingdom built its wealth not in gold, but in artistry and trade. The Kingdom of Benin produced bronze sculptures that stunned European visitors with their sophistication. When Portuguese traders first reached Benin in the 15th century, they discovered an art tradition rivaling Renaissance Europe. The bronze plaques adorning the palace walls depicted court ceremonies, warriors, and mythical creatures with astonishing detail. These were not crude imitations, but the product of centuries of independent artistic development. The Oba, or king, commissioned these works to record dynastic history and glorify the kingdom's power. Each bronze head represented a deceased ruler, an ancestor to be venerated by the living. The complexity of the casting bewildered European observers, who could not fathom how such mastery had developed so far from their own lands. Today, these bronzes fill museums of the Western world, though calls grow louder for their return. Their beauty endures, a silent testament to a kingdom the world nearly forgot. Benin City's walls were once longer than the Great Wall of China, encircling a vast urban area. Before European colonialism swept through West Africa, Benin City was one of the largest cities on the planet. Its earthwork walls stretched for 16,000 kilometers in total, surrounding a network of connected settlements. These walls accumulated over centuries as the kingdom expanded. European visitors in the 15th century compared it favorably to great cities of their own continent. The streets were broad and straight, the houses neat and well-ordered. A Dutch traveler described it as larger than Amsterdam. The city operated on a sophisticated grid system that suggested careful urban planning. When the British invaded in 1897, they burned much of it to the ground. The walls have largely disappeared now, swallowed by modern expansion. In its prime, Benin City stood among the most impressive urban centers on Earth. The lost wax casting technique of Benin bronze workers remains one of the finest in human history. The artisans of Benin developed the lost wax casting method to astonishing precision. The process began with a clay core shaped into the desired form, then coated with beeswax to capture every fine detail. This wax layer was encased in more clay, then heated until the wax melted away, leaving a perfect hollow. Molten bronze was poured into this space, filling every crevice. When cooled, the outer clay was broken away to reveal the finished sculpture. The technique demanded absolute mastery, for a single air bubble could ruin months of work. Benin's craftsmen guarded their secrets jealously, passing knowledge from master to apprentice through generations. The results speak for themselves in the lifelike expressions and intricate patterns that survive today. No two pieces are identical. This was industrial art of the highest order. The Kingdom of Congo was a centralized state with provinces, taxation, and a complex bureaucracy. When Portuguese explorers arrived at the mouth of the Congo River in 1483, they encountered not scattered tribes, but a sophisticated kingdom. The Kingdom of Congo stretched across Central Africa, divided into 6 provinces, each governed by appointed officials. Taxes flowed from villages to regional capitals and onward to the royal court. A currency system based on shells facilitated trade across vast distances. The king ruled through a council of nobles who could check his authority. This was a complex political organism with laws, courts, and diplomatic protocols. The Portuguese initially treated the Congo as equals, exchanging ambassadors and signing treaties. Christianity spread quickly through the kingdom, adopted by the elite. For a time, Congo stood as a bridge between African tradition and European influence. Congo's kings corresponded with European royalty as equals and sent ambassadors to the Vatican. The kings of Congo did not view Europeans as superiors, but as distant neighbors worthy of diplomatic engagement. Letters flowed between the Congolese court and the thrones of Portugal and Spain, discussing trade, religion, and matters of state. In 1514, King Afonso I wrote to the Portuguese monarch as one Christian ruler to another, addressing him as brother. Congolese ambassadors walked the halls of the Vatican and palaces of Lisbon, representing their kingdom with dignity. The Pope acknowledged the legitimacy of the Congolese Church. These were not the actions of a subjugated people, but of a proud nation engaging with the wider world on its own terms. The Congolese nobility adopted European titles while maintaining their African identity. For a time, Congo stood as proof that African kingdoms could meet Europe at the negotiating table. Great Zimbabwe's stone walls were built without mortar, yet they have stood for 8 centuries. In the highlands of southern Africa, a city rose from stone between the 11th and 15th centuries. Great Zimbabwe's walls reach heights of 11 meters, built entirely without mortar through careful dry stone fitting. The builders selected granite blocks with such precision that the weight of the stones themselves held the structure together. The great enclosure contains nearly 1 million granite blocks arranged in elegant curves. European colonists refused to believe Africans had built it, inventing theories about Phoenicians or lost Israelites. The truth is simpler, that the Shona people created this wonder through generations of skill. The city controlled the gold and ivory trade between the interior and the Indian Ocean coast. At its peak, perhaps 18,000 people lived within its walls. It remains a symbol of African ingenuity. Zimbabwe means house of stone in the Shona language, a name that endures to this day. When the modern nation chose its name at independence in 1980, it reached back across centuries to claim the legacy of Great Zimbabwe. The word combines 2 Shona terms, Dzimba meaning houses and Mabwe meaning stones. This description captures the very essence of a civilization defined by its architecture. The The name connects the present to a past that colonial powers tried to erase by attributing the ruins to foreign builders, but the stones speak for themselves. Today, the name Zimbabwe appears on maps from Harare to London. The stone bird carvings found at the site became the national emblem, appearing on the flag and currency. In choosing this name, a young nation declared that its history stretches back to ancient builders who shaped stone into greatness. The name itself is a quiet act of reclamation, a refusal to forget. And now we journey eastward, across the Indian Ocean, to the subcontinent where empires united millions under a single rule. The Maurya Empire was the first to unite nearly all of the Indian subcontinent under one ruler. In the 4th century before the Common Era, a young man named Chandragupta Maurya accomplished what none before him had managed. He unified the fragmented kingdoms of the subcontinent into a single entity stretching from Bengal to Afghanistan. This was empire on a scale never seen before, governed from Pataliputra through an elaborate bureaucracy. The Mauryan state employed spies, maintained a standing army, and collected taxes with efficiency. Roads connected the empire's corners, facilitating trade and troop movement. Chandragupta's chief minister, Kautilya, wrote the Arthashastra, a treatise on statecraft that would influence political thinking for ages. The empire regulated weights and measures. For the first time, the diverse peoples of the subcontinent lived under one law. The Maurya achievement set the template for Indian empires that followed. Emperor Ashoka's pillars carried messages of peace across hundreds of miles. Across the vast Maurya Empire, stone pillars rose from the earth bearing the words of Emperor Ashoka. These pillars, some reaching 15 meters in height, were carved from single blocks of polished sandstone. Upon them, Ashoka inscribed his edicts, messages of Dharma that he wished all subjects to follow. The inscriptions promoted religious tolerance, care for animals, respect for elders, and the welfare of all living beings. Each pillar was topped with carved animals, most famously the 4 lions that would become the emblem of modern India. The pillars were placed near roads and pilgrimage sites. This was mass communication in an age before print, the emperor's voice made permanent in stone. Many pillars still stand today, their inscriptions still legible after more than 2,000 years. They represent an early example of a ruler using monuments for peaceful messages. Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism after the Kalinga War changed the course of Asian history. The conquest of Kalinga in 261, before the Common Era left over 100,000 dead. Ashoka had won, but the victory broke something inside him. According to his own inscriptions, the suffering he witnessed filled him with profound remorse. He converted to Buddhism and renounced conquest by force, declaring that true victory lay in winning hearts through Dharma rather than swords. This transformation turned the Maurya Empire into a vehicle for spreading Buddhist teachings across Asia. Ashoka sent missionaries to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, and perhaps even the Greek kingdoms. The faith that might have remained a minor sect became a world religion through imperial patronage. Ashoka built stupas and monasteries across his empire. His example demonstrated that power could be exercised through moral authority. No ancient ruler is remembered primarily for his rejection of war. And as these distant memories settle around you, perhaps you can feel your breathing slow, your body grow heavier. There is no need to follow every thread of history. Let the stories wash over you like warm water, carrying away the tensions of the day. The Mauryan road system connected the empire from the Himalayas to the southern seas. Across the vast Mauryan Empire, a network of roads stretched like veins carrying the lifeblood of commerce and communication. The Grand Trunk Road ran for 2,500 kilometers from the northwest frontier to the eastern capital. These were not rough dirt tracks, but carefully engineered highways with milestones, rest houses, and wells for travelers. The state maintained them carefully, understanding that roads meant control. Merchants moved goods along these routes, carrying silk and spices from distant lands. Royal messengers could traverse the empire swiftly and safely. The roads also served military purposes, allowing rapid deployment of troops. This infrastructure outlasted the empire itself, with portions remaining in use for millennia. Even today, modern highways follow routes first laid out by Mauryan engineers. The Gupta Empire is called India's Golden Age for its achievements in science, art, and literature. Between the 4th and 6th centuries, the Gupta Empire presided over a flowering of culture that transformed human knowledge. Under Gupta patronage, astronomers calculated the movement of planets with remarkable accuracy. Surgeons performed operations described in detailed medical texts. Poets composed works that remain standards of Sanskrit literature today. The universities at Nalanda and Taxila drew scholars from across Asia. Artists perfected techniques of sculpture and painting that influenced traditions across the continent. This was an age when knowledge was treasured and shared freely. The decimal system, zero, and many mathematical innovations emerged from Gupta academies. Yet this golden age would not last forever. When it ended, its achievements dispersed across the world, seeds of wisdom scattering to distant lands. Gupta mathematicians invented the concept of zero and the decimal system we still use today. The numbers you see on your screen, the calculations that run your devices, all trace back to innovations made in the Gupta Empire. A mathematician named Aryabhata calculated pi to 4 decimal places and proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis. Brahmagupta defined rules for calculating with zero, treating it as a number rather than merely an absence. The decimal system, where the position of a digit determines its value, freed mathematics from the cumbersome systems of Rome and Greece. Arab scholars learned these methods and carried them westward, which is why we call them Arabic numerals. But their true origin lies in Gupta India, where thinkers saw patterns in numbers that others had missed. Zero transformed mathematics, making possible calculations that were previously unimaginable. Every time you count or calculate, you use tools forged in a forgotten empire. The Kushan Empire bridged the cultures of Rome, Persia, India, and China along the Silk Road. At the crossroads of the ancient world, the Kushan Empire flourished where Central Asia meets South Asia. The Kushans controlled the mountain passes through which the Silk Road flowed, positioning themselves as middlemen between the great civilizations of East and West. Roman gold flowed through their markets, Chinese silk passed through their caravanserais, and Indian spices perfumed their bazaars. The empire was a melting pot of cultures unlike anything seen before. Greek artistic traditions mixed with Indian religious themes and Persian royal customs. Buddhism spread northward into Central Asia and eventually China largely through Kushan patronage. The capital city of Peshawar became a center of Buddhist learning and artistic production. Though the Kushan kings are nearly forgotten today, their empire shaped the cultural geography of Asia. Kushan kings placed images of Greek, Persian, and Indian gods on the same coins. The coins of the Kushan Empire tell a story of religious tolerance that few states could match. On a single coin might appear the Greek god Helios, the Persian deity Mithra, and the Buddha, all rendered with equal respect. King Kanishka, the most famous Kushan ruler, depicted himself alongside deities from a dozen traditions. This was not confusion, but deliberate policy. The Kushans ruled a diverse empire where Zoroastrians prayed alongside Buddhists. Rather than impose a single faith, they celebrated them all. Their coinage served as propaganda for a cosmopolitan vision of empire. traders from distant lands could find familiar gods on Kushan money, a reassurance of welcome. This tolerance made the Silk Road possible as a peaceful avenue of exchange. The coins survive as tiny monuments to an age when different faiths coexisted under a single crown. The Chola dynasty built a navy so powerful that it controlled trade across the Bay of Bengal. While most ancient empires focused on land, the Chola dynasty of southern India looked to the sea. Between the 9th and 13th centuries, Chola fleets dominated the waters from the Ganges Delta to the Straits of Malacca. This was maritime power on a scale rarely seen in the pre-modern world. Chola admirals launched expeditions that captured ports in Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and Southeast Asia. They raided the great Srivijaya Empire, humbling a rival that had controlled the spice trade for centuries. Chola merchants established trading posts throughout the region. The wealth that flowed back transformed their homeland into a center of temple building and artistic achievement. The great temple at Thanjavur remains a testament to Chola prosperity. Their navy has been almost forgotten, yet it shaped Asia's economic geography for 300 years. And beyond India, across the seas of Southeast Asia, island empires rose on the wealth of spices and trade. The Srivijaya Empire controlled the straits that connected China to India and Arabia. Between the 7th and 13th centuries, whoever controlled the Strait of Malacca controlled the richest trade route in Asia. The Srivijaya Empire, based on Sumatra, held that choke point for over 600 years. Every ship carrying Chinese porcelain westward or Indian textiles eastward passed through waters they dominated. The capital at Palembang grew fabulously wealthy on tribute from passing merchants. Srivijaya was a maritime empire in the truest sense, ruling not vast tracts of land but the sea lanes that connected civilizations. Buddhist pilgrims from China to India stopped there to study, making it a center of religious learning. Yet because Srivijaya left few stone monuments, it remained nearly invisible to historians until the 20th century. The empire vanished, but the trade routes it controlled endured for centuries. Srivijayan monks translated Buddhist texts that spread across Asia for centuries. The monks of Srivijaya performed a service to human knowledge that echoes across 1,000 years. At monasteries in Palembang, scholars translated Buddhist scriptures from Sanskrit into local languages and Chinese. The famous Chinese pilgrim Yijing spent years there studying Sanskrit before continuing to India, and later translated texts that shaped East Asian Buddhism. Srivijaya became a way station for knowledge moving between India and China, with monks gathering and transmitting sacred writings. The empire's position on the maritime trade routes made it a natural hub for intellectual exchange. Students came from Java, China, and the mainland to study at Srivijayan monasteries. When the empire declined, many texts survived only in Chinese copies made from Srivijayan translations. The monks are forgotten now, but the wisdom they preserved still guides millions. Their quiet work outlasted the empire. The Majapahit Empire claimed sovereignty over much of modern Indonesia at its height. In the 14th century, the Majapahit Empire arose on Java and extended its influence across the vast Indonesian archipelago. At its peak, the empire claimed authority over territories stretching from Sumatra to New Guinea. The capital near Surabaya was a center of art, literature, and refined court culture. Hindu and Buddhist traditions blended with local beliefs to create a distinctive Javanese civilization. The empire maintained diplomatic relations with China, sending tribute missions that brought back marks of favor. Javanese merchants traded cloves and nutmeg from the Spice Islands, growing wealthy as intermediaries. The court supported poets who composed epic works still performed today. When Islam spread through the archipelago, Majapahit gradually declined. yet its memory persists in Indonesian national identity as a golden age. Majapahit's court poets wrote the Nagarakretagama, a poem describing more than 80 vassal states. In 1365, a court poet named Prapanka composed a poem that offers the clearest window into Majapahit's grandeur. The Nagarakretagama describes the realm with loving detail, listing territories that acknowledged Majapahit's authority. More than 80 places are named, stretching across the archipelago and into the Malay Peninsula. The poem records royal ceremonies, religious festivals, and the layout of the capital. It depicts a sophisticated court where literature and religion flourished under royal patronage. Scholars debate how much was exaggeration and how much reflected reality, but the poem remains an invaluable source. It was forgotten until Dutch scholars rediscovered it in a Lombok palace. Today it serves as evidence of a great civilization that flourished before European contact. The poem turns ancient ruins into living places. The Khmer Empire built Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument ever constructed. In the jungles of Cambodia, the Khmer kings raised temples that still inspire 9 centuries later. Angkor Wat, built in the early 12th century, covers more than 400 acres and contains more stone than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Originally dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, it later became a Buddhist site, reflecting the empire's spiritual evolution. The temple's 5 towers represent Mount Meru, the home of the gods in Hindu cosmology. Miles of bas-relief carvings depict scenes from mythology and court life in exquisite detail. The builders aligned the structure so precisely that the sun rises directly over the central tower on the spring equinox. When European explorers stumbled upon the ruins in the 19th century, they could scarcely believe that such a monument had risen in the jungle. Today it appears on Cambodia's flag, a symbol of national pride and ancient achievement. At its peak, the Khmer capital was the largest city in the pre-industrial world. Angkor was not merely a temple complex, but a sprawling metropolis that dwarfed any European city of its era. At its height in the 12th century, the Greater Angkor region housed perhaps 1 million people, making it the largest urban center on Earth. The city spread across 1,000 square kilometers, connected by canals and causeways. Wooden houses since decayed, once clustered around the stone temples that remain today. Markets bustled with traders from China, India, and the Malay world. Elaborate ceremonies drew pilgrims from across Southeast Asia. The kings who ruled from Angkor commanded resources that no European monarch could match. Yet by the 15th century, the city was largely abandoned, its people scattered by changing trade routes and environmental collapse. The jungle reclaimed what humans had built, until only the stones remained to testify to Angkor's former glory. Khmer engineers created a water management system that could sustain over 1 million people. The true engineering marvel of Angkor lay not in its temples, but in its water system. Khmer engineers constructed reservoirs called bares that could store billions of liters of monsoon rainfall. Canals distributed this water throughout the dry season, allowing intensive rice cultivation that fed the massive population. The West Bare alone measures 8 kilometers long and covers an area larger than many modern cities. This hydraulic infrastructure transformed a seasonal landscape into year-round farmland. When the system worked, harvests were abundant and the kingdom prospered. But climate shifts eventually stressed the network beyond its capacity. Some scholars believe the failure of the water system contributed to Angkor's abandonment. The ruins of these reservoirs still dot the landscape, witnesses to engineering ambition on a scale not matched for centuries. And northward, along the ancient Silk Road, kingdoms flourished in the oasis cities of Central Asia. The Sogdians were the merchant princes of the Silk Road. their language the common tongue of trade. For nearly 1,000 years, Sogdian merchants dominated the overland trade between China and the Mediterranean. From their homeland in modern Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, they established trading posts across Central Asia and into China itself. Their language became the lingua franca of the Silk Road, spoken by merchants of many nations. Sogdian letters on paper and leather have been found from the steppes of Mongolia to the borders of Persia. They carried silk westward and glass eastward, growing wealthy as intermediaries. The Sogdians also spread religions along the trade routes, introducing Buddhism, Manichaeism, and Zoroastrianism to new regions. When the Islamic conquest swept Central Asia, Sogdian culture gradually faded, absorbed into the Persian and Turkic worlds that followed. Yet for centuries, to trade on the Silk Road was to encounter Sogdian merchants and their ancient tongue. Sogdian traders established communities from China to Constantinople, linking east and west. In the cosmopolitan streets of Tang Dynasty Chang'an, Sogdian merchants ran taverns and trading houses that welcomed travelers from across Eurasia. Similar communities existed in Samarkand, Dunhuang, and dozens of oasis cities along the Silk Road. These trading colonies maintained their distinct identity while integrating into local societies. Sogdian families intermarried with Chinese, Persian, and Turkic peoples, creating networks that facilitated commerce. Archaeological finds reveal Sogdian textiles in Syrian tombs and Sogdian inscriptions in Chinese monasteries. Their trade networks moved not just goods, but ideas, art, and religious teachings across thousands of miles. The Sogdians created what some scholars call the first globalized economy, where a merchant could send goods from China to Byzantium through trusted partners. This world vanished with them, leaving only traces in archives. The Bactrian kingdom blended Greek culture with Central Asian traditions after Alexander's conquests. When Alexander the Great died, his generals divided his empire among themselves. In what is now Afghanistan and northern Pakistan, Greek successors established a kingdom that would last 2 centuries. These Hellenistic kings ruled a population of Persians, Indians, and Central Asian peoples, creating a unique cultural fusion. Greek became the language of administration, while local religions continued to flourish. Coins depicted kings with Greek features and Indian titles. Sculptors blended Greek naturalism with Buddhist iconography. The famous Gandharan art style, which gave the Buddha a human face modeled on Apollo, emerged from this meeting. Though isolated from the Mediterranean by the rise of Parthia, these Greeks maintained their identity for generations. The Bactrian kingdom was a remarkable experiment in cultural synthesis far from its origins. Greek-style theaters and gymnasiums stood in the shadow of Buddhist monasteries in Bactria. In the cities of Bactria, a Greek citizen might attend athletic contests in the morning and listen to Buddhist teachings in the afternoon. Excavations have revealed gymnasiums where young men wrestled in the Greek fashion, temples to Zeus and Athena, and stupas containing Buddhist relics, all within the same urban spaces. Some kings converted to Buddhism while maintaining Greek royal traditions. The Greek ambassador Megasthenes recorded Indian philosophies that influenced later Hellenistic thought. This cultural exchange ran in both directions, with Buddhist missionaries later traveling to Alexandria. The bilingual inscriptions of King Ashoka, written in Greek and Aramaic, testify to this cosmopolitan world. For a brief moment, the traditions of Greece and India met in the mountain valleys. That fusion produced art and ideas that influenced both East and West. The Parthian Empire held back Roman expansion for nearly 500 years. While Rome conquered the Mediterranean world, another great power blocked its advance to the east. The Parthian Empire arose in northern Iran in the 3rd century before the Common Era and endured until the 3rd century of our era. At their height, the Parthians controlled territory from the Euphrates to the borders of India. Roman legions repeatedly marched against them and repeatedly suffered devastating defeats. The disaster at Carrhae, where Crassus lost his army and his life, remains one of Rome's greatest military humiliations. Parthian mounted archers, the finest cavalry in the ancient world, could devastate slow-moving infantry formations. Yet the Parthians were also sophisticated diplomats, and long periods of peace alternated with wars. They facilitated Silk Road trade, enriching themselves as middlemen between Rome and China. This forgotten empire was one of the few powers to meet Rome as an equal. Parthian mounted archers invented the famous Parthian shot, firing arrows while retreating at full gallop. The Parthian shot became so legendary that it gave us the English phrase parting shot. These warriors could turn in the saddle while their horses galloped away from pursuing enemies and loose arrows with devastating accuracy. Roman infantry, trained to advance and close with the enemy, had no answer to this tactic. At Carrhae, the Parthians circled the Roman legions for hours, filling the air with arrows while remaining beyond reach of Roman swords. The technique required years of training from childhood, creating warriors who seemed part of their horses. Composite bows gave their arrows penetrating power at long range. This style of warfare would be adopted by later steppe peoples, from the Huns to the Mongols. The Parthians eventually fell, but their military innovations influenced cavalry tactics for 1,000 years. The parting shot became a symbol of defiance. The Göktürk Khaganate created the first known Turkic alphabet, carved on stone monuments. In the 6th century, a new power arose on the Central Asian steppes. The Göktürks united the nomadic tribes of Mongolia and created an empire stretching from Manchuria to the Black Sea. They left behind some of the earliest written records in any Turkic language, carved on stone stelae that still stand in the Mongolian grasslands. The Orkhon inscriptions record the deeds of Khans and the history of their people in a script derived from Sogdian writing. These monuments speak of victories and defeats, of loyalty and betrayal, in language that remains remarkably moving today. The Göktürks maintained diplomatic relations with both China and Byzantium, playing the great empires against each other. When they fragmented, their script and traditions passed to successor states across Central Asia. Modern Turkish, Uzbek, and Kazakh all descend from the language first written on those ancient stones. And between the Black Sea and the Caspian, another empire left its mark on the crossroads of continents. The Khazar Khaganate was one of the few empires in history to adopt Judaism as its state religion. Between the Caspian and Black Seas, a remarkable empire arose from Turkic peoples of the steppes. The Khazar Khaganate dominated the Caucasus region from the 7th to 10th centuries, and at some point, its ruling class converted to Judaism. This conversion remains one of history's great mysteries, for the Khazars had no historical connection to the Jewish people. Some scholars believe they chose Judaism because it was neutral between the Christian Byzantines and Muslim Arabs who pressured them from either side. The ordinary population continued to follow various faiths, including Islam, Christianity, and traditional beliefs, creating a religiously diverse empire. Khazar rulers corresponded with Jewish communities across the Mediterranean. When the Khaganate fell to the Rus in the 10th century, its Jewish ruling class dispersed into the surrounding lands. Khazar merchants traded fur, honey, and slaves across 3 continents from their fortress cities. The Khazars controlled one of the great crossroads of the medieval world, where goods from the Baltic forests met products from Persia and Arabia. From their capital at Idil on the Volga Delta, merchants organized caravans carrying northern furs to the markets of Baghdad and Constantinople. Honey and wax from Slavic forests fetched high prices in the south. The slave trade was particularly lucrative, with captured peoples sold to buyers across the Mediterranean and Middle East. Khazar coins have been found as far away as Scandinavia and China, evidence of their commercial reach. The Khaganate levied taxes on all goods passing through its territory, growing wealthy without producing much itself. This position as middleman made the Khazars powerful but also vulnerable. When trade routes shifted and rivals grew stronger, the empire declined. The Khazars held back the Arab expansion into Eastern Europe for over a century. In the sweeping narrative of Islamic expansion, the Khazars are often forgotten, yet they played a crucial role in shaping Eurasian history. When Arab armies swept northward after conquering Persia, they encountered the Khazar Khaganate at the Caucasus Mountains. Brutal wars followed in the 7th and 8th centuries, with neither side achieving decisive victory. The Khazars stopped the Arab advance into Eastern Europe, a feat that Byzantium alone could not accomplish. Without this barrier, the steppes of Russia and the lands beyond might have become Muslim centuries earlier, altering the course of world history. The Khazars lost many soldiers and much treasure in these conflicts, but they preserved their independence. This military achievement is rarely remembered, overshadowed by more famous battles. Yet the Khazars held the line when conquest seemed unstoppable. The Avar Khaganate dominated Central Europe from the Hungarian plains for 200 years. Before the Magyars arrived, before Charlemagne's empire reached its height, the Avars ruled the Pannonian Basin in what is now Hungary. These nomadic warriors swept into Europe in the 6th century, filling the power vacuum left by the Hunnic collapse. From their great ring fortresses on the Hungarian plains, they raided Byzantine territory and extracted tribute from Slavic peoples across the region. The Avars were master horsemen who brought cavalry tactics that would influence European warfare for generations to come. Their Khaganate grew wealthy on plunder and tribute, accumulating vast treasures of gold and silver. Charlemagne's campaigns in the late 8th century finally broke their power, and the fabled Avar treasure disappeared into Frankish coffers. The Avars were absorbed into surrounding populations, leaving little trace. Avar metalworkers created belt fittings and jewelry that influenced Byzantine fashion. The artistic achievements of the Avars are often overshadowed by their reputation as fierce warriors, yet their craftsmen produced works of remarkable sophistication. Avar belt fittings, cast in bronze and gold, featured intricate interlacing patterns and stylized animal motifs that captivated admirers. These designs spread westward into Frankish and Lombard territories, influencing early medieval decorative art. Byzantine nobles adopted Avar-style belt sets as fashionable accessories despite political hostility toward the Khaganate. Excavations of Avar graves have revealed elaborate jewelry, weapons adorned with gold, and fine drinking vessels testifying to a wealthy elite. The crafting techniques combine traditions from the steppes with Byzantine and Persian influences. When the Avars fell, their artisans carried skills into the cultures that absorbed them. And as you drift through these echoes of forgotten kingdoms, let your body rest a little deeper now. Your breath is soft, your limbs are heavy, and there is no need to go anywhere or do anything. The night holds you gently, as it held all those who came before. The kingdom of Dacia resisted Roman conquest until Trajan finally subdued it in a bloody war. North of the Danube, in the mountains of modern Romania, the Dacian kingdom resisted Roman expansion for over a century. The Dacians built a sophisticated civilization with fortified cities in the mountains, advanced metalworking, and a religious system centered on their god Zalmoxis. Under King Decebalus, they proved formidable opponents, defeating Roman armies and extracting tribute from the empire itself. Domitian made peace on humiliating terms rather than continue costly wars. Trajan finally conquered Dacia in two brutal campaigns between 101 and 106. The wars were among the bloodiest in Roman history, with heavy casualties on both sides. When Decebalus committed suicide rather than be captured, his treasury fell into Roman hands. The conquest brought Rome vast wealth but stretched its resources dangerously thin. Dacian gold treasures were so vast that they funded Roman building projects for generations. The wealth that Trajan extracted from Dacia astonished the entire Roman world. Ancient sources claim he captured 5 million pounds of gold and twice that weight in silver, figures that may be exaggerated but indicate extraordinary riches. The Dacian kings had accumulated this treasure through centuries of gold mining in the Carpathian Mountains and collecting tribute from neighboring peoples. Trajan used this windfall to fund Rome's greatest building projects, including his famous Forum and the markets that still stand. The influx of Dacian gold allowed tax reductions and distributions to Roman citizens. Gladiatorial games celebrating the victory lasted 123 days. Modern Romania still honors its Dacian heritage, seeing in those ancient warriors the ancestors of the modern nation. The gold is long spent, but the memory endures. Trajan's column in Rome tells the story of the Dacian Wars in spiraling stone relief. In the heart of Rome stands a monument telling the story of a forgotten kingdom in remarkable detail. Trajan's column rises nearly 40 meters into the sky, its surface covered with a spiraling frieze narrating the Dacian Wars in over 2,000 carved figures. Roman soldiers cross the Danube on pontoon bridges, Dacian warriors defend their mountain fortresses, and Trajan appears over 50 times directing events. The carvings provide invaluable evidence for how both armies dressed, fought, and lived. Dacian fortifications, weapons, and hairstyles are depicted with documentary precision that historians still study today. At the summit originally stood a statue of Trajan, later replaced with St. Peter. For nearly 2,000 years, visitors have studied these carvings, the most detailed visual record of any Roman campaign in existence. And across the Atlantic, in lands that would one day be called the New World, civilizations rose long before Europeans arrived. The Olmec civilization is considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Before the Maya built their towering temples or the Aztecs founded their vast empire, the Olmec had already created Mesoamerica's first complex civilization. Flourishing from around 1500 BCE along the Gulf Coast of Mexico, these remarkable pioneers developed the region's first writing system, calendar, and ceremonial ball game. Their priests studied the movements of the stars, and their artists created styles that would influence every subsequent culture in the region. The Olmec built the first pyramids, established long-distance trade networks, and developed religious symbols that would endure for millennia. Their jaguar worship, feathered serpent imagery, and rain deity representations became foundations for later beliefs. The term mother culture is debated among scholars, but the Olmec's profound influence on Mesoamerican civilization cannot be denied. Olmec sculptors carved colossal stone heads weighing over 40 tons without metal tools. The 17 known Olmec colossal heads stand as monuments to ancient ambition and skill. Each massive sculpture, carved from single basalt boulders, towers up to 3 meters high and weighs between 6 and 50 tons. The Olmec had no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no draft animals to assist them. They quarried these enormous stones from volcanic mountains over 80 kilometers away. Scholars believe the boulders were dragged to rivers, floated on rafts through swamps and waterways, then hauled overland to their final locations. Each head displays unique facial features beneath a distinctive helmet, likely representing specific rulers. The expressions range from serene to stern, each personality captured in stone over 3,000 years ago. That the Olmec carved at least 17 demonstrates their remarkable organizational capabilities. The Olmec invented the Mesoamerican ball game that would be played for 3,000 years. In the humid lowlands of ancient Mexico, the Olmec created a game that would become central to Mesoamerican civilization. The ball game, played with a heavy rubber ball on specially built courts, was more than sport. It was a ritual that connected the human world to the divine, a drama of life and death played out under the eyes of gods and spectators. The Olmec built the first ball courts, carved stone images of players in their protective equipment, and established rules and meanings that would endure. Every subsequent civilization in the region adopted this game, from the Maya to the Aztecs. The rubber ball itself was a marvel, made from latex harvested from tropical trees using techniques the Olmec may have invented. For over 3,000 years, the ball game was played across thousands of courts throughout Mesoamerica, a testament to the enduring power of Olmec innovation. The Zapotec built Monte Alban, one of the earliest cities in the Americas. High in the mountains of Oaxaca, the Zapotec people carved away an entire hilltop to create Monte Alban, a city in the clouds. Beginning around 500 BCE, this urban center would dominate the region for over 1,000 years. At its height, Monte Alban housed perhaps 30,000 people and served as the capital of the Zapotec state. The site features massive plazas, pyramid temples, tombs decorated with painted murals, and an astronomical observatory. The Zapotec developed one of the earliest writing systems in the Americas, used to record the deeds of rulers and the movements of stars. Their carved stone monuments record conquests and astronomical events with sophisticated dating systems. When the city was eventually abandoned around 700 CE, it had served as a center of power and learning for over a millennium. The ruins still stand as testament to what the Zapotec achieved. Zapotec astronomers created a calendar system that tracked both solar and ritual cycles. The Zapotec were keen observers of the heavens, and their astronomers developed sophisticated calendar systems that intertwined practical and sacred time. They tracked the solar year of 365 days for agricultural purposes, determining when to plant and harvest. Alongside this, they maintained a ritual calendar of 260 days that governed religious ceremonies and determined auspicious dates. The intersection of these two cycles created a longer cycle of 52 years, at the end of which the calendars realigned. This system was so effective that later civilizations, including the Maya and Aztecs, adopted variations of it. At Monte Alban, buildings were aligned with celestial events, turning the city itself into an astronomical instrument. The Zapotec recorded their observations in carved inscriptions that scholars are still working to fully decipher. The Toltec were remembered by the Aztecs as master craftsmen and warriors. To the Aztecs, the Toltec were legends, the ideal civilization that preceded their own. From their capital at Tula, the Toltec dominated central Mexico from around 900 to 1200 CE. They were remembered as master craftsmen who invented the arts of civilization, as warriors who conquered vast territories, and as priests who communed with the gods. Aztec nobles claimed Toltec ancestry to legitimize their rule. The reality, as archaeology reveals, was more complex but no less impressive. The Toltec built great temple pyramids, created distinctive sculptures of warriors and feathered serpents, and established trade networks across Mesoamerica. Their influence reached as far as the Maya lands of Yucatan. When the Toltec Empire fell to internal conflict and invasion, its memory lived on, shaping how later peoples understood their own history and aspirations. And along the Pacific coast of South America, kingdoms flourished in the desert and the mountains. The Moche civilization created portrait vessels so detailed that individual faces can still be recognized. Along the arid coast of northern Peru, the Moche people created pottery that captured the human face with extraordinary precision. Their portrait vessels depict specific individuals with such detail that we can see their expressions, facial features, and emotions. Some subjects appear in multiple vessels at different ages, allowing us to watch them grow older. Scholars believe these portraits represent rulers, warriors, and priests whose identities were important to preserve. The Moche had no writing system, but these ceramic faces speak across the centuries. Beyond portraits, Moche potters depicted animals, plants, and mythological scenes with similar precision. Their techniques of mold making and painting allowed for mass production while maintaining artistic quality. When you gaze upon a Moche portrait vessel, the face of someone who lived 2,000 years ago gazes back. Moche pyramids in Peru are among the largest adobe structures ever built. The Moche constructed massive pyramids of mud brick that still dominate the Peruvian landscape after 2,000 years. The Huaca del Sol, Temple of the Sun, was the largest adobe structure in the ancient Americas, containing over 140 million mud bricks. Nearby, the Huaca de la Luna, Temple of the Moon, was decorated with colorful murals depicting their fierce spider deity and elaborate ritual scenes. These structures were not simply temples, but complex ceremonial centers where priests conducted rituals and the dead were buried with rich offerings. The construction required enormous labor forces, sophisticated engineering to prevent collapse, and constant maintenance against the rare but devastating rains. Over centuries, the Moche periodically buried older structures under new, creating layers that reveal their changing beliefs. The Chimu Empire built the largest adobe city in the ancient world at Chan Chan. On the desert coast of Peru, the Chimu constructed Chan Chan, a city of mud that dazzled visitors with its scale and sophistication. Covering over 20 square kilometers, Chan Chan was the largest adobe city in the ancient world and the largest pre-Columbian city in South America. Its towering walls, some reaching 9 meters high, enclosed 10 royal compounds where successive kings lived surrounded by treasuries and warehouses. When a king died, his compound was sealed as his tomb, and his successor built a new one. The walls were decorated with intricate friezes depicting fish, birds, and geometric patterns that survived despite centuries of weather. Canal systems brought water from rivers over 40 kilometers away to sustain gardens in the desert. The Chimu ruled the coast until the Inca conquered them around 1470, preserving their skilled artisans. Chimu goldsmiths created works of such beauty that they were prized by the Inca conquerors. The metalworking skill of the Chimu was legendary even in their own time. Their goldsmiths worked precious metals with techniques that amazed observers and still challenge modern craftsmen. They created tumi ceremonial knives with elaborate figures atop the handles, ear ornaments that dangled with tiny golden bells, and masks for the dead that gleamed with eternal splendor. The Chimu developed techniques for electrochemical gilding centuries before Europeans discovered similar processes. When the Inca conquered the Chimu around 1470, they were so impressed by these skills that they relocated master craftsmen to their capital at Cusco. Much Chimu gold was later melted down by Spanish conquistadors, but enough survived in tombs to reveal the sophistication of their art. Each piece represents countless hours of patient labor, transformed into objects of lasting beauty. The Wari Empire built roads and administrative centers that later inspired the Inca. Centuries before the Inca built their famous road network, the Wari had already connected the Andes with highways and administrative centers. From their capital near modern Ayacucho, the Wari expanded across Peru between roughly 600 and 1000 CE. They built planned cities at strategic locations, each following similar layouts with D-shaped temples and rectangular administrative compounds. Their roads linked these centers across mountains and deserts, creating an infrastructure that later rulers would inherit and expand. The Wari also developed the quipu, the system of knotted strings that the Inca would later use for record-keeping. When the Wari state collapsed around 1000 CE, centuries passed before the Inca reunited the Andean world. But the memory of a vast connected empire, with roads and cities and a common administrative system, showed what was possible. Wari textiles used colors and techniques that still influence Andean weaving today. The Wari were master weavers who created textiles of extraordinary complexity and beauty. Using vibrant dyes extracted from plants, insects, and shellfish, they wove cloth in reds, blues, yellows, and purples that still astonish with their intensity after 1,000 years. Their designs featured geometric patterns, stylized animals, and deity figures worked into fabrics using techniques that took years to master. Some Wari textiles contain over 200 threads per centimeter, denser than most modern fabric. The dry conditions of the Peruvian desert preserved many examples, allowing us to study their craft in detail. Wari weaving traditions survived their empire's fall, passing through generations of Andean weavers. Modern artisans in Peru still use techniques and patterns that trace their origins to these ancient masters. In the threads of Andean textiles, the Wari legacy endures. The Tiwanaku civilization thrived at almost 4,000 meters above sea level. On the windswept shores of Lake Titicaca, the Tiwanaku people built a civilization at altitudes where most outsiders struggle to breathe. At nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, they created one of the most significant pre-Columbian empires in South America. Their capital featured massive stone temples, elaborately carved gateways, and engineering that still puzzles researchers today. The famous Gateway of the Sun was carved from a single block of stone, covered with intricate reliefs of deities and astronomical symbols. Tiwanaku farmers developed raised field systems that protected crops from frost in this harsh environment. Their influence spread across Bolivia, Peru, and northern Chile through trade and religion. When the state collapsed around 1000 CE, perhaps due to drought, its religious symbols lived on to influence later cultures. And returning now to the ancient Mediterranean, we find civilizations that once competed with Greece and Rome. The Etruscans built cities, temples, and tombs across central Italy before Rome rose to power. Before Rome dominated Italy, the Etruscans had already created a sophisticated civilization in the hills of Tuscany and beyond. From the 9th century BCE, they built cities with paved streets, irrigation systems, and impressive temples. Their painted tombs, preserved in necropolis cities of the dead, reveal a vibrant society that loved music, banqueting, and athletic competition. The Etruscans were master metalworkers whose bronze and gold artifacts were prized across the Mediterranean. They developed one of the earliest alphabets in Italy, adapted from the Greek, though their language remains only partially understood. For centuries, Rome was ruled by Etruscan kings and deeply influenced by Etruscan culture. When the last Etruscan king was expelled, Rome continued many Etruscan traditions while gradually absorbing their cities. Etruscan women enjoyed freedoms that shocked the patriarchal Greeks. Greek visitors to Etruscan lands were scandalized by what they saw. Etruscan women reclined beside their husbands at banquets rather than being confined to separate quarters. They attended athletic events, owned property, and were commemorated in tomb paintings and sculptures alongside their spouses. Some inscriptions identify individuals by their mothers' names as well as their fathers, suggesting women held considerable status within their society. Greek writers condemned these customs as evidence of barbarism, but their shocked accounts reveal a society with different gender norms than the classical world. Etruscan tomb paintings show women elegantly dressed, participating in religious rituals, and enjoying music and entertainment. When Rome absorbed Etruscan culture, it adopted many practices but gradually imposed stricter limitations on women's public roles. Much of early Roman religion and ritual came directly from Etruscan tradition. When Romans sought to understand the will of the gods, they often turned to Etruscan methods. The practice of haruspicy, reading divine messages in the entrails of sacrificed animals, came directly from the Etruscans. Roman priests studied Etruscan books of divination, and Etruscan seers remained influential for centuries. The grand temple architecture of early Rome followed Etruscan models with their distinctive columns and decorations. Even the famous Roman triumph, the victory parade granted to conquering generals, had Etruscan origins. The fasces, bundles of rods that became symbols of Roman authority, were Etruscan regalia. Romans acknowledged this debt even as they conquered Etruscan cities, preserving sacred texts and consulting haruspices during crises. The religious foundation of Rome owed more to these neighbors than Romans sometimes cared to admit. The Thracians were among the finest warriors and horsemen of the ancient Mediterranean. In the rugged lands between the Danube and the Aegean, the Thracian tribes bred some of the ancient world's most feared warriors. Greek and Roman sources describe them as fierce fighters who wore distinctive caps and wielded curved swords with devastating effect. Thracian cavalry was especially renowned, and their horsemen served as mercenaries across the Mediterranean for many centuries. Spartacus, the gladiator who led the great slave revolt against Rome, was a Thracian. The god Dionysus was believed by some Greeks to have Thracian origins, and Thracian religious practices influenced Greek mystery cults. Though never unified into a single kingdom for long, the Thracian tribes remained independent or semi-independent for centuries. When finally absorbed into the Roman Empire, they provided some of its finest auxiliary cavalry units. Thracian tombs have yielded gold treasures, rivaling those of the Egyptian pharaohs. Beneath the burial mounds of Bulgaria lie treasures that have astonished archaeologists and filled museum cases. Thracian goldsmiths created works of extraordinary beauty, from drinking vessels shaped like animal heads to elaborate pectorals and helmets. The treasure from Panegyrisk includes golden rhytons, drinking horns shaped like stags and rams, weighing over 6 kilograms in total. Other tombs have revealed golden masks, wreaths, and horse trappings that rival the finest artistry of any ancient culture. The Thracians apparently believed in lavishing wealth on their dead, burying kings and nobles with everything they might need in the afterlife. Many of these tombs were robbed in antiquity, making the surviving discoveries all the more remarkable. Each new excavation adds to our understanding of a culture long overshadowed by their Greek neighbors. The Illyrians controlled the eastern Adriatic coast and produced several Roman emperors. Along the rugged eastern shores of the Adriatic, where mountains plunge into crystal waters, the Illyrian tribes built their kingdoms. They were renowned as fierce warriors and skilled sailors who sometimes turned to piracy when other opportunities failed. Greek and Roman colonies dotted their coastline, trading and sometimes clashing with native peoples. The Illyrians resisted Roman expansion for generations before being gradually absorbed into the empire. Once part of Rome, however, they rose to prominence, providing some of the empire's greatest soldier emperors. Diocletian and Constantine traced their origins to these Adriatic lands. The Illyrian military tradition that had once challenged Rome became essential to defending it. Today, Albania and parts of neighboring countries claim Illyrian heritage, though the exact relationship to modern populations remains debated among scholars. Illyrian Queen Teuta challenged Roman naval power in the Adriatic Sea. In the 3rd century BCE, Queen Teuta inherited a powerful Illyrian kingdom and quickly made herself Rome's rival. She encouraged or tolerated piracy against Roman and Italian merchants, and when Rome sent ambassadors to demand she stop, she allegedly had one of them killed. This act of defiance brought Roman legions to the Adriatic in the First Illyrian War. Teuta's forces resisted fiercely, but Roman might eventually proved overwhelming. She was forced to surrender much of her territory, pay tribute, and limit her fleet. The Illyrian Wars marked the beginning of Roman involvement in the Eastern Mediterranean. Teuta herself disappears from the record after her defeat, but her brief defiance of Rome shows that even a minor ruler could challenge the emerging superpower. Her story reminds us that history is filled with forgotten figures who shaped events. The Carthaginian Empire controlled the Western Mediterranean before its destruction by Rome. Founded by Phoenician colonists on the North African coast, Carthage grew into the greatest naval power of the ancient Western Mediterranean. From their great city in modern Tunisia, Carthaginian merchants and admirals dominated trade routes from Spain to Sicily. Their wealth came from commerce, silver mining, and the agricultural abundance of North Africa. When Rome expanded beyond Italy, conflict was inevitable. The Punic Wars stretched over more than a century, producing legendary figures like Hannibal, who marched elephants over the Alps. In the end, Rome's relentless determination prevailed. Carthage was destroyed in 146 BCE, its site cursed, its survivors sold into slavery. A great civilization was erased so thoroughly that reconstructing its history requires piecing together fragments from hostile sources. Carthaginian explorers may have sailed around Africa 2,000 years before the Portuguese. Ancient sources tell of a Carthaginian navigator named Hanno who sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, down the coast of Africa, establishing colonies and exploring unknown shores. His account, preserved in Greek translation, describes volcanic eruptions, tropical forests, and strange peoples. Some scholars believe he reached as far as modern Cameroon or even further. Another expedition, led by Hamilco, reportedly explored northward toward Britain and the Atlantic islands. If these accounts are accurate, Carthaginian sailors ventured into waters that Europeans would not explore again for nearly 2,000 years. The Carthaginians kept their navigation secrets guarded to protect trade monopolies. When Rome destroyed Carthage, much of this knowledge was lost. We can only imagine what maps vanished when the great libraries burned. And as you rest among these echoes of lost worlds, feel how your body has grown softer, how the boundaries between waking and sleeping have begun to blur. Let your thoughts become clouds, drifting slowly across a vast and peaceful sky. There is nothing to hold, nothing to remember, only rest. The Nabateans carved the city of Petra into rose-red cliffs in the desert of Jordan. In one of the world's harshest deserts, the Nabateans created a city of extraordinary beauty. Petra, their capital, was carved directly into rose-red sandstone cliffs, its facades glowing in the morning and evening light. The famous treasury, glimpsed at the end of a narrow canyon, is only the most recognizable of hundreds of carved tombs, temples, and chambers. The Nabateans grew wealthy, controlling the incense trade routes that brought frankincense and myrrh from Arabia to the Mediterranean. Caravans laden with precious goods rested in their rock-hewn city before continuing their journeys. When Rome annexed Nabatea in 106 CE, the city gradually declined as trade routes shifted. Sand slowly filled the streets, and the rose-red city was forgotten by the outside world until a Swiss explorer rediscovered it in 1812. Nabatean water engineers turned barren desert into flourishing gardens and pools. The Nabateans performed engineering miracles in one of the driest places on Earth. With annual rainfall of less than 15 centimeters, they created a system that captured, stored, and distributed every precious drop. Channels carved into rock faces directed rainwater into underground cisterns. Ceramic pipes carried water throughout Petra, supplying fountains, gardens, and public pools that astonished visitors from wetter lands. The Nabateans understood that water was their true wealth, more valuable than the incense and spices that passed through their markets. Their technique spread across the region, allowing agriculture in places that seemed impossible to cultivate. When Petra was abandoned, its water systems fell into disrepair, and the desert reclaimed what the engineers had won. Modern archaeologists are still mapping the extent of their achievements. The kingdom of Pontus under Mithridates challenged Roman dominance in 3 devastating wars. On the shores of the Black Sea, the kingdom of Pontus produced Rome's most formidable enemy since Hannibal. Mithridates VI came to the throne as a young man and forged his kingdom into a military power that challenged Roman expansion across the eastern Mediterranean. In 88 BCE, he ordered the massacre of all Romans in Asia Minor, killing perhaps 80,000 people in a single day. 3 devastating wars followed, draining Roman resources and requiring Rome's greatest generals, including Sulla and Pompey. Mithridates proved a master of guerrilla warfare, surviving defeat after defeat. He ruled for over 50 years, and only his own son's betrayal finally brought him down. Even in death, he defied his enemies, reportedly unable to be poisoned because of his lifetime of self-inoculation, dying instead by the sword. Mithridates was said to have made himself immune to poison by taking small doses daily. The fear of assassination haunted Mithridates throughout his long reign, and legend says he protected himself by consuming small doses of poisons daily. This practice, later called Mithridatism, was said to have made him immune to toxins that killed lesser men. He reportedly created a universal antidote combining dozens of ingredients, a formula sought by physicians for centuries afterward. When his final defeat came and he tried to poison himself rather than be captured by the Romans, the poison allegedly had absolutely no effect at all. His bodyguard had to kill him with a sword. Whether the story is true or exaggerated, it captured the ancient imagination. Medieval and Renaissance physicians studied Mithridatism, and some practiced it, seeking immunity from poison. The king's name lives on in this dubious but fascinating medical term. And in the final echoes of our journey, we find truths that connect all these forgotten empires. Many forgotten empires fell not to conquest, but to climate change, drought, or shifting trade routes. We tend to think of empires falling to invading armies, but many of history's forgotten kingdoms simply faded away. Climate change brought drought that turned fertile lands to desert and dried up the rivers that sustained cities. The Tiwanaku watched Lake Titicaca shrink, their raised fields becoming useless. The Khmer saw the monsoons fail, their elaborate water systems unable to cope. Shifting trade routes were equally devastating, as new paths made once vital waypoints irrelevant. Petra declined when ships replaced camels for transporting incense. Samarkand lost importance when sea routes bypassed the Silk Road. Disease sometimes delivered the final blow, as plagues swept through weakened populations. These quieter endings remind us that human societies depend on fragile systems of climate, trade, and health that can change without warning. The languages of some lost empires survive only in a handful of inscriptions. When an empire falls, its language often dies with it. Etruscan survives in thousands of inscriptions we can barely read, its meaning locked away by our limited understanding. Elamite, once spoken across a vast kingdom, exists mainly in royal proclamations we still struggle to interpret. The Dacian language left almost no trace when Roman rule imposed Latin on the conquered population. Linear A, written by the Minoan civilization of Crete, remains undeciphered despite decades of scholarly effort. Each lost language represents an entire way of thinking, categories of thought, and poetic traditions we can never fully recover. When the last speaker of a language dies, a universe of meaning vanishes. The forgotten empires speak to us through their ruins and artifacts, but their voices, the words they used to pray and love and argue, are often silenced forever. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal forgotten kingdoms we never knew existed. Every year brings new discoveries that reshape our understanding of the past. Satellite imagery reveals ancient cities beneath jungle canopies, hidden for centuries under vegetation. DNA analysis identifies migrations and connections we never suspected. Underwater archaeology explores submerged harbors and shipwrecks that preserve their secrets in the deep. In recent decades, we have discovered that the Amazon was home to complex societies, that Southeast Asian jungle hid medieval cities as large as anything in Europe, and that early humans reached distant islands far earlier than we believed. The forgotten empires we know about are surely only a fraction of those that once existed. Beneath the deserts, the forests, and the seas, countless civilizations await discovery. Each new finding reminds us that the past was richer and more complex than we imagined. The descendants of forgotten empires often live on, carrying traditions they no longer remember. The people of forgotten empires did not simply vanish. They merged with conquerors, migrated to new lands, and adapted to changed circumstances. Modern Romanians claim descent from the Dacians who resisted Rome. Albanians trace their ancestry to the Illyrians of the Adriatic coast. In Ethiopia, traditions of the Aksumite Empire still shape religious practices. Persian festivals preserve echoes of Elamite rituals. The descendants carry genes, words, customs, and perhaps memories of their vanished kingdoms, even when the connection has been forgotten. When a grandmother teaches a grandchild an old song or strange recipe, she may be passing down something ancient without knowing it. The forgotten empires live on in their descendants, fragments of their culture scattered like seeds across the world, waiting to be recognized and remembered. Every great empire believed it would last forever, and every one of them was wrong. The pharaohs built for eternity, carving their names in stone that they believed would never crumble. Roman poets sang of an empire without end, stretching to the horizon. Chinese emperors called their realms the center of the world that would endure forever. Each empire, at its height, seemed permanent and powerful, its end unimaginable to those who lived within it. Yet every one of them fell or transformed beyond recognition. The lesson is not that building is futile, but that nothing human is permanent. The empires we have remembered tonight built great things, achieved remarkable feats, and left legacies that still influence us. That they eventually faded does not diminish their accomplishments. Perhaps the awareness that all things pass can make us appreciate what we have, care for what we build, and treat each moment as a precious gift. The memory of forgotten empires reminds us that what we build today may one day sleep beneath the sand. As you drift towards sleep, Consider that our own cities and monuments may one day become ruins for future archaeologists to puzzle over. The buildings we think permanent will crumble, the languages we speak will change beyond recognition, and the names we know will be forgotten. This is not a cause for sadness, but for wonder. We are part of a long story that stretches back thousands of years and will continue long after we are gone. The forgotten empires lived, loved, built, and dreamed just as we do. Their stories are our stories, their hopes and fears echoes of our own. In remembering them, we connect ourselves to the great web of human experience that stretches across the ages. And perhaps in some distant future, someone will remember us and wonder what it was like to live in our time and sleep in our beds and dream our dreams. And so our journey through the forgotten empires of history draws softly to a close. We have walked among the stone towers of the Hittites and the golden courts of Aksum. We have drifted through the silent libraries of Timbuktu and the carved temples of the Khmer. We have traced the trade routes of Sogdian merchants and stood in the shadow of Olmec colossal heads. From the mountains of Urartu to the deserts of the Nabateans, from the bronze workshops of Benin to the terraced cities of the Andes, we have remembered what the world forgot. These are the empires that shaped continents, connected civilizations, and then quietly returned to the earth from which they rose. If this gentle journey through forgotten history has helped you rest tonight, consider leaving a like, sharing these stories with a friend, or subscribing to join us on future wanderings. There are more wonders waiting in the shadows of the past, more kingdoms to remember, more mysteries to explore. This channel grows one sleepy soul at a time, and your presence here means more than you know. Right now, as you listen, these forgotten empires are still out there. Their ruins lie beneath farmers' fields and city streets. Their treasures wait in undiscovered tombs. The languages they spoke still echo in words we use without knowing their origin. You are connected to them through the slow chain of human history, a single thread in a tapestry that stretches back to the beginning of memory itself. Let your eyes close now if they have not already. Feel the weight of your body pressing into whatever holds you. Notice the rise and fall of your breath, steady and slow like the turning of centuries. Let your jaw soften, your shoulders drop, your hands grow still. There is nothing left to do tonight. The forgotten empires will keep their vigil while you rest. Tonight, as you sleep, somewhere in the world an archaeologist is carefully brushing sand from a fragment of pottery that has not seen sunlight for 3,000 years. Somewhere, a scholar is deciphering an inscription in a language that has been dead for millennia. The forgotten empires are waking up slowly, piece by piece, as the world remembers what it once knew. And you, resting here in the dark, are part of that remembering. You are a quiet presence in the long story of human curiosity, peacefully resting among the wonders. Sleep well, sweet dreams. And may you carry with you the gentle knowledge that all things pass, and in their passing, leave behind seeds of wonder for those who come after. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.